Namaskara, welcome again to the NEET Zoology Biology sessions by me, Pooja Joshi. In the previous class, we have covered the entire chapter of digestion and absorption. Likewise, we shall move ahead with the next chapter, that is breathing and exchange of gases. So we are all well aware what this chapter deals with. Okay, it deals with the air that is taken inside. What exactly role does it play in generating energy in our body? And as a byproduct, what is the byproduct or waste product? What is it that is generated as a result of this process and is exhaled out? Okay, so we shall be seeing the entire cycle of this particular concept. And before we move ahead with the academic part of it, let's just see from NEET perspective what exactly is the weightage of this chapter and from which category of questions will be asked. Okay, more percent of it. So here we can see that 53% of it will be with respect to mechanism of breathing. Okay, mechanism of breathing. Mechanism of breathing, mainly we shall study about that, of course, but just an idea, it deals with the inhalation and exhalation and what are the changes that the thoracic cavity undergoes during this process. Okay, so majorly that part of questions there are likely to appear. Next, 32% of it is with respect to the disorders of the respiratory system. Okay, next we have 5% is about the human respiratory system and 10% is about transport of gases. Alright, so the exchange of gases, to some extent we shall there are chances of them being asked, but majority from the kind of study analysis of last 8 years, this is what it is. Okay, so considering this, let's move ahead. So topics to know under this chapter. Alright, so first is the respiration and its modes or types. Okay, types and modes of respiration. What are the different types of respiration? Does it take place in the same way like it does in humans, or is it in different way? Do all organisms have nose, nostrils and lungs like we have, or do they have it in different ways? We shall be looking at that. Okay, next is respiratory structures in animals. Like I just mentioned now, it's not that all organisms have lungs itself for respiration. Okay, so they can have other modes, so we shall see what other types of structures they have for respiration. Next, moving to the anatomy of the human respiratory system. Okay, we shall study where it is located, what are the parts of it, alright, in finer details. Next is the mechanism of breathing. I just mentioned a point saying that it deals with the inhalation and exhalation, the mechanical process. Right, what exactly happens to all the structures associated with the respiratory system. Okay, next is the exchange of gases. This is the physiology part. Alright, so whatever air we take in during breathing, what role does it play in our body? How does it, the gaseous state of it, how does it travel throughout the body? All of that we shall be studying here. How does it get exchanged and then travel throughout the body? That part will be covered in transport of gases as well. Okay, there is a very important concept called as oxygen dissociation curve. Okay, this concept is really very important part of this chapter, which is an extension of transport of gases. Okay, next is pulmonary air volumes. Okay, mainly here, this part deals with how much air can be taken in, what is the capacity of our body, of the lungs to withhold the air. It's all about that. Lastly, again, as I mentioned previously in the previous sessions, every physiological chapter ends with the disorders. Okay, what will happen if normal condition is not maintained of the particular system? All right, so we shall be studying each and every point of this from NEET perspective. So without wasting time, let's just go ahead. Alright, yeah, so respiration and its types. Okay, first of all, what is the definition of respiration? Okay, so respiration is the process where external air or air from the atmosphere is taken into the body. Okay, so the external air is taken inside the body, atmospheric air is taken into the body, and that is utilized for a process called as cellular respiration. Okay, this process, cellular respiration, is the one which generates energy at the end of it. Alright, so respiration can be defined as a process where atmospheric air is taken in and given out by the end of it, which generates energy. Alright, helps in cellular respiration. This is the actual definition of respiration, main thing. Now, there are two types of it. One is the aerobic respiration, the other one is the anaerobic respiration. We are all quite aware that aerobic respiration is the one that takes place in the presence of oxygen, and anaerobic respiration takes place in the absence of oxygen. Okay, so is it compulsory? Like, ultimately, what is it? Oxygen is going to act as one of the component to break down the glucose or whatever food is for oxidation process, and then finally releasing energy. So can this happen when there is no oxygen? Yes, it can happen to some extent, but the end products will be different. Alright, so we also called anaerobic respiration as fermentation. Sorry. Sorry for this one. Fermentation, where the end product is not exactly water and energy. Along with that, there is lactic acid produced, okay, in case of anaerobic respiration, okay, and alcohol also. Yeah, so moving ahead with the second type of respiration, we can say that it is external respiration and internal respiration. Alright, external respiration is simple breathing. Okay, I told you, when you study about this chapter respiration, you need to understand that there are two separate ways that we have to study this. One is just by understanding what breathing is. Next is by what is external, respiration should come here. Yeah, so external respiration is simply breathing. Internal respiration is the cellular respiration that I spoke about. Okay. Alright. Yeah. So aerobic respiration is when food molecule or glucose molecule is broken down in the presence of oxygen to give you energy, water, okay, and in case of anaerobic respiration, there is lactic acid and alcohol produced. Okay, the process is also called as fermentation. Alright, yeah. Next part is modes of respiration. What are the different modes of respiration we see? We see that there is cutaneous type of respiration. Cutaneous means the term refers to skin. Alright, to respiration through skin. We see this in not very highly or advanced developed organisms. We find this type of respiration in some annelids like the earthworm. Then we find this type of respiration in frogs. Okay, mostly these two organisms. Alright, these two categories of organisms. Next, frogs, and in the sense any amphibian for that matter. Okay, but not all annelids respire through skin. Alright, next, brachial respiration. Brachial respiration is also called as respiration through the gills. We find this type of respiration in fishes or aquatic vertebrates. Okay, they possess gills as respiratory structures. Bucopharyngeal respiration, which refers to which is seen in frogs, where the organism keeps its mouth open so that air enters, alright, because they do not have a very well defined nostril. So they need to take help of their buccal cavity, and the air enters through it, and then the pharynx region helps in the exchange of gases here. Okay, yeah. Next is the pulmonary respiration, which involves lungs. The term pulmonary refers to the lungs. Okay, like renal refers to the kidney, excretory system. Alright, similarly, pulmonary refers to lungs. We see most advanced land vertebrates, what are there? They all possess lungs. Starting from the amphibians itself. Okay, frogs also possess lungs. They exhibit pulmonary respiration. Okay, these frogs are very interesting organisms. They exhibit skin respiration or cutaneous, also buccopharyngeal and pulmonary. So why do they have all three types? Okay, now they have all, and to some extent, when they are young ones, when the tadpole structure of it, when we say, they exhibit gill respiration also. So almost frogs exhibit all types of respirations, because these organisms live both in land as well as water, and when they live on land, they do not live in completely dry regions. They live in areas which are moist. Okay, so moist skin, like we see in earthworm also, the skin is almost mucousy or moisty. So such moist surface helps in easy exchange of gases. Alright, that is one reason. And they do because they are vertebrates, and quite advanced vertebrates, land vertebrates, they have primitive lungs as well, which are put to use by pulmonary respiration. Okay, and humans, starting from reptiles to mammals, all of them exhibit pulmonary respiration. Okay, yeah. Alright, let's just have a look at respiration in fishes, where we will just see the structure of gills. You can see that these gills are in the form of compartments. Okay, and each compartment has got a dense network of capillaries. Alright, so just pardon me for the language, this is not proper, this is not English, it seems some other language, but anyway, I will explain it to you. So we see that these gills are present near the head, a part of the head region, and located behind the eyes of the fish streamlined body. They are present on both the sides, and in case of bony fishes, they are covered with a flap called as the operculum. In case of cartilaginous fishes, this operculum is absent. Okay, yeah. Now, each gill which is there, as shown here, they have compartments, and each compartment is internally provided with rich supply of capillaries. Now, one blood vessel, when blood is going to run through this, okay, dissolved oxygen from the end, anyways they are in water, so they are not going to kind of depend on gaseous state of oxygen, because that is not available. So they are going to be dependent on dissolved oxygen, which is absorbed by the gills, and it is picked up by the blood vessel, blood capillary, which takes it ahead. Okay, and the blood which is coming in, which is carrying carbon dioxide, that is given in the water in dissolved form itself. Okay, so this is what it is. Oxygen enters in dissolved form through the gills, and it is carried through with the help of blood vessels to all the parts of the body. Okay, this is how it is. All right, yeah. So considering this type of respiration in fishes, we will go ahead and see what type of respiration, special type of respiration, is seen in frogs. So as I told you that frogs exhibit cutaneous or skin respiration, buccopharyngeal respiration, and pulmonary respiration. So just have a look here. Nose, or the nostril, what we say, as I told you, it does not have a very well defined nostril, though there is a point given here. It has to take help of its mouth. Okay, and it is going to enlarge this region, pharynx, that's going to bloat whenever air fills in. Okay, so we see that some frogs, on Nat Geo or Discovery Channel, in case you have happened to observe any episodes of this frogs, you will see that there are some species of frogs where this part enlarges. It goes in and out, in and out. Okay, that is because air is getting filled through the mouth, that is the pharynx. Okay, next we have, you can see that there are such primitive, small lungs present. Okay, so these lungs are connected, and even they can take in air, exchange gases and give out carbon dioxide. And skin, through skin surface also this process takes place because it has a moist skin surface. Alright, so dissolved oxygen and carbon dioxide get exchanged here. Yeah. So yeah, this is just a representation of how exactly is the buccopharyngeal and pulmonary respiration taking place in frogs. Let's just see one by one. Air enters pockets of buccal cavity. Okay, here air enters here. Glottis opens. Elastic recoil of lungs and compression of chest wall reduces the air volume. Okay, air is forced out of the lungs and out of the mouth and nares. Okay, nares in the sense these are the nostrils, the term used, external nares, it's also pronounced as nares or nares. Okay, so air enters through both, but majorly, as I mentioned, through the mouth or the buccal cavity, and it fills here in the pharynx and fills here in the lungs. Later, while expelling it out, it moves in the opposite direction. Alright, mouth and nares close, floor of the buccal cavity raises, air is pushed into the lungs. Alright, so what happens? First, when air enters, it fills the air pockets. Okay, whatever air was there in the lungs is expelled out. The air in the pharynx is kept as it is. Next step, there is compression of the the pharynx, during which the air enters the lungs. Okay, just see how it is. Remember, first air is taken into the body. We'll start with one cycle. Air first enters the pharynx. Okay, in the pharynx it will stay there. From pharynx it will go to the lungs, and from lungs it will go to the exterior. Okay, so next the glottis is closed. Glottis closes. Air exchange occurs in the lungs. So this glottis, this structure which is going to obstruct air from moving out till the exchange takes place, because exchange of gases takes place mainly in the lungs itself. Alright, because there are air sacs present in the lungs. So how does it happen? Air enters into the pharynx. From pharynx, whatever previously respired air is there, that is thrown out from the lungs. Now next, the air in the pharynx enters the lungs, and then finally glottis is closed so that the exchange of gas takes place. Next is different respiratory structures in different animals. Okay, the most primitive animals, again let us just take example of amoeba, because it's favorite organism of most of the biology teachers. They can draw it anyway, that's why. Okay, yeah, so different respiratory structures in animals. First one is the plasma membrane. As I mentioned, in these primitive organisms that do not have any specialized structures, they exhibit, in them plasma membrane acts as a surface for exchange of gases. In dissolved form, all of the microorganisms live. Okay, most of 99% of them need water as a medium for their survival. So in water they have dissolved oxygen. Okay, they take in that. Okay, and they give out dissolved carbon dioxide once the oxygen is used in breaking down the food that has been consumed. Okay, so in this way plasma membrane is one such respiratory structure. Body wall, as already studied, skin, what we say cutaneous one. Okay, so here the body wall or the skin is going to help in the exchange of gases. Next are the gills. Already as mentioned, it's mainly the superclass Pisces that exhibits presence of gills. We also find gills in some lower lower amphibians like exolotl larva. Okay, and also the amphibian in its tadpole stage, as I already mentioned. Okay, frog, when it is undergoing indirect development, it is said to be in a tadpole stage, which is almost similar to a tiny fish. Okay, so that also has gills. Trachea are seen in some insects, like especially the arthropods. Okay, Trachea in them is a long tubular structure which has got extensions and then open into exterior spiracles. Okay, so these spiracles act as the modes that take air, okay, and supply to the trachea. And trachea is a structure, they do not have lungs, so trachea itself exchanges the gases and it is sent out. Okay, so here trachea plays as a major respiratory structure in most of the arthropods. Coming to book lungs. Book lungs are seen in certain types of aquatic arthropods, wherein the lungs that are there, book lungs are also seen in some mollusks. Okay, so these book lungs are they are arranged in the form of books in the shelf. That's the reason they are called as book lungs. Finally, there are lungs which we see which are spongy structures equipped with trachea, bronchi, bronchioles and end with the alveoli or the air sacs. Okay, so most important, most common in microbes are plasma membrane, body wall in some lower invertebrates, okay, gills in lower vertebrates like superclass Pisces, trachea in arthropods, book lung also in some arthropods and mollusks, and lungs finally in the terrestrial vertebrates. Okay, let's go ahead. Coming to the human respiratory system, please have a proper look at the structure. Alright, epiglottis, we know that it is a part of, not exactly a part of any system, but it plays role in obstructing food from entering into the trachea or the respiratory system. As mentioned previously, food cannot be tolerated by this environment of trachea. Hence, epiglottis helps in obstructing food and allowing only the entry of air or anything that is in gaseous state. Okay, larynx is the structure which is also called as a voice box. Voice box because there are vocal cords, sound box or voice box because there are vocal cords here that vibrate and generate sound. Understand one thing, if you all have had a chance of observing an instrument called harmonium, okay, you see that with the help of left hand there is a flap that is frequently moved to and fro. This is so that the air enters inside and then by pressing the keys on it the sound is produced. Alright, same phenomenon is applied to the human larynx as well. Without the entry of air the sound will not be produced. Okay, now I'll just give you an example. Without taking in air, just try to speak something, just exhale air out and speak something. Even if you want to, you cannot, because it is the air that is going to help in the vibration of the vocal cords or the membranes, okay, that are in the larynx, and then that is going to produce what we say as sounds. Okay, in singers who are there, in them these vocal cords are finely, they are present in a very different form where they are very fine, delicate, and they can produce sounds in a very fine tone. Okay, that's why they are singers. Okay, coming to trachea. Trachea is a major structure of the respiratory system. Okay, just no per se, it is just before the lungs. Alright, this is a tubular structure composed of incomplete C-shaped, okay, or C-shaped incomplete circles, C-shaped rings, cartilaginous rings, incomplete ones, that are 12 in number. Okay, 12 incomplete cartilaginous rings that are going to be that are arranged one above the other. Okay, internally it has got cilia. Okay, trachea has got cilia that help in obstructing any particle, any gaseous harmful particle that has entered through the air, okay, like dust particles or such things. First, initially, basically the entry point, the nostrils, the hair that are there in the nostrils, they obstruct most of the dust particles. But by chance, if there is any that enters the trachea, this is the cilia, what I told you, they are going to help in obstructing. Okay, further at the end of trachea, then we see that there is branching, single branching called as the bronchus. Alright, so this branching is called as the bronchus. One bronchus enters the right lung, the other enters the left lung. Okay, yeah. Next, bronchus then further again divide similar to that of a branch. Okay, so these branches are called as bronchioles. Okay, so bronchus divides into many finer bronchioles. Okay, so each and every bronchiole, it divides, and finally ends into these bulged structures called as the air sacs or the alveoli. Okay, so this entire structure, okay, is covered with pleural membranes. Okay, we call this entire structure as a lung. Okay, pleura is the covering of the lungs, which is made up of three important membranes called as the pleural membranes. Internally, between these branches, there is pleural fluid present. Okay, that keeps the shape of the lungs intact. Alright, yeah. Then we have another important part which is not directly attached to the respiratory system, which is called as a diaphragm. Diaphragm is a strong muscle, alright, that helps in the movement of the thoracic cavity up and down and aids in the process of respiration or breathing rather. Okay, so these are nothing but the cut parts of ribs, they cover like this. So just to represent, there are 12 pairs of ribs which completely cover the thoracic region, inside which the lungs, the respiratory system is present. You can see the heart structure present here. Alright, so sandwiched between two lungs, we find the human heart. Alright, going ahead, just have a look at this entire structure. Yeah, just another view of it. These are different lobes of it that are present. Okay, trachea, which branches into each lung. When we see the end, just look at this. Bronchiole ends with these tiny balloon-like structures called as the alveoli. Each alveoli is completely covered with blood capillary. Okay, it looks like this, like somewhat, like how fishes appear when they're caught in the net. Similar to that, it looks like this alveoli has been captured inside a net, right? So network of capillaries are surrounded around each and every alveoli. This is because exchange of gases actually happens at this region. Hence, the capillary blood supply and the capillary network has to be really strong. Okay, so the nasal cavity. Nostril is the opening. Inside to that is a nasal cavity. Okay, nostril is the opening. Inside is a nasal cavity. Then we have the pharynx. Part of the pharynx associated with the nose is the nasopharynx. Okay, then we have the epiglottis and the glottis. Then larynx, sound box. Trachea. It is 4-inched structure which is made up of 12 cartilaginous rings. Okay, incomplete or C-shaped cartilaginous rings. Trachea branches out into bronchus. Bronchus divide into bronchioles, and each and every bronchiole ends with a bunch of air sacs called as the alveoli. Okay, alveoli sac. Alveoli sac in turn has got small extensions called as the alveoli. You can have an idea of it by looking at this structure. So the whole thing is the sac. In that, each bulge is called as the alveoli. Alright, let's go ahead. Mechanism of breathing. Okay, so mechanism of breathing, as I told you, very important part of the chapter. So please pay attention. Like when air is inhaled, while understanding this, I want each one of you to practically do it. Alright, take a deep breath. You can see that your shoulders are moving above. They're moving up, right? Okay, this is when you take air in. You hold it for a few seconds and exhale. You will see that the shoulders move down. This is what you are seeing physically, externally, what is happening to you. Internally, what is happening when you are breathing consciously is that, just have a look here. You need to focus on the thoracic cavity. Okay, you need to focus on what is happening to the diaphragm, okay, and what is happening to the lungs. Okay, so what are the three parts you need to observe? What changes are taking place in the lungs or to the lungs? What is happening to the lungs, to the diaphragm, okay, then to the thoracic cavity. Okay, yeah, let's see what happens. When you take in air, each and every alveoli is going to be filled with air, just like balloon being blown. Small tiny balloon that is used during playing Holi. Just imagine you putting air in that. So same is the situation of an alveoli. When you take in air, air fills into each and every alveoli. So that needs space. It's going to expand. As a result, lungs are going to expand. Okay. Diaphragm is going to be pushed down because it needs space, right? It needs space. So diaphragm is pushed down, lungs is going to occupy this place because each and every alveoli is going to be filled with air. Okay. So what are the two changes that have happened? One is lungs have expanded, diaphragm has been pushed down, and the thoracic cavity. What has happened to thoracic cavity? It is lifted up. That's what we see, our shoulder has moved up. This is because the entire thoracic cavity has been moved up. Next, what happens when you exhale air outside? During expiration, what happens is the thoracic cavity comes down back to normal. Lungs are going to contract. Diaphragm is also going to contract. Because the air that was taking place, taking the space, is moved out, is thrown out. As a result, that much space is not needed, and hence the lungs take back the shape of what they were originally. This process is continuous. Let me tell you, from the moment a child is born, or rather exposed to the atmospheric air, it is going to start breathing. That's the reason why a baby cries the moment it is born. Okay, and even if it doesn't cry, we have seen in movies and around us with experiences that doctor sees that it hits the baby, and it is a very important thing for the baby to cry, because when you cry you're going to create sound, and that sound, it's like to cry. Initially when we were kids also, you just imagine how would you cry. You take in air and then start crying, right? So same process, same phenomenon is applied here. To cry and to create sound, you need to take in air. That is the first time that a baby is going to take in air, atmospheric air, and result in a loud cry. Okay, the purpose is served here. All the first time ever air enters the lungs. You might ask, then till then, ma'am, air does what is the use of lungs when the baby is inside the body? Because in the body, mother's placenta is providing dissolved oxygen to it and is taking the carbon dioxide produced by the baby cells, right? So the baby's respiratory system need not have to be functional. Alright, so the first time when it comes out of the womb, that's where it has to cry, take in air, and activate its lungs. Okay, so from that moment onwards till an individual is completely whose respiratory system shuts down, till that point of time continuously there is respiration or breathing in and breathing out taking place. I hope I'm clear the mechanism of breathing. It is simple actually, but this part is really important from exam point of view. Okay, yeah, just have a look quickly. Okay, let's go ahead. Exchange of gases. Now the air that has been taken in. Understand that air is a mixture of gases. It has got various gases, and inert gases are there, nitrogen is there, oxygen is there, carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, all the pollutants are there, So this air, which is a mixture of gases, out of it our system has been designed in such a beautiful way that only oxygen is going to be absorbed. Though 70% of the air contains nitrogen in it, it is only oxygen is only 21%. Alright, Even in that situation, it is the oxygen that the body has been processed to absorb and no other gas. Though whatever air we respire, just imagine this alveoli, it is a mixture of gases. The entire mixture is here. Let me just represent it in this way. Take different colors. Black represents some color, red represents some gas. Okay, red is another gas, green is another gas, blue is another gas. Okay, we will just consider blue to be oxygen. This oxygen, only it is the oxygen that enters the blood vessel, blood capillary, and not any other gas. Then what happens to the other gases? They are thrown out of the body. This time, along with them, instead of oxygen, it is a carbon dioxide that is going to accompany them. Okay, all the others are simply just accompanying. It is like they have no other role to play in the entire system here. Okay, yeah. Alright, so next part, just have a look here. Here we see that the oxygen that has come inside through the respiratory system is going to move into the blood capillary, and the blood capillary that is carrying CO2 with it is going to be sent out. This CO2 will go out with the other gases that are useless in the system. Okay, that's what is exhalation. During exhaling, it is the CO2 that we respire out. Have a look here as well. Okay, so these are the body tissues. They give carbon dioxide. I've been saying carbon dioxide, carbon dioxide. From where is this carbon dioxide formed? Okay, like plants produce oxygen as a result of photosynthesis, animals produce during respiration, body metabolic activity, CO2 is a waste product produced as a result of metabolic reactions. CO2 has got no role to play in the entire body. In case it had any role to play, it would be utilized by the body itself, but utterly it has zero role to play. So this, when it has no role to play, it is a waste product, and we cannot store waste product for any reason, right? So this waste product has to be thrown out of the body, which is done by the circulatory system. It carries it, and finally the respiratory system throws it out. But how is, imagine your fingertips. Fingertips cells are there. These cells are also going to produce CO2. So how is this CO2 produced here going to go and reach till your lungs and going to be expelled out? It is again the circulatory system comes to the rescue. But in what way is it going to go? Understand, carbon dioxide is exchanged with the RBCs and the plasma, blood plasma, in three different forms. Okay, what are those three? We'll come to that a little later. As of now, just understand that carbon dioxide is in three different forms in the blood vessel when it is traveling towards the heart. Okay, yeah. On the other hand, oxygen is going to move only associated with the hemoglobin. Okay, I use this term hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is a pigment. Pigment is anything that imparts color. Okay, so hemoglobin is a pigment. Basically, when we just try to understand about hemoglobin, it is a conjugated protein, where globin is the protein part and heme is the metal part. Okay, metal here is the iron. Iron metal associated with the protein makes it a conjugated protein. This protein provides place for 4 oxygen atoms to attach. Okay, so let's just imagine if this is hemoglobin molecule, just completely imaginary to make you understand. Okay, it provides place only for 4 molecules of oxygen to attach. One can attach here, one can attach here, another can attach here, and 4. Only 4 molecules of oxygen, each hemoglobin. Understand that there are millions and millions of hemoglobin molecules in one RBC. Okay, if this is one RBC, this one RBC contains n number of hemoglobin molecules. I'm just speaking that each hemoglobin molecule can provide place for 4. So let us say there are 1000 RBCs, hemoglobin molecules, okay, in one RBC. How many oxygen molecules will be getting carried? It is 1000 into 4, so it will be 4000 oxygen molecules in each. I just took an example. It is not only 1000. They are thousands, millions and millions of molecules of hemoglobin in each RBC. That's the reason why RBCs are enucleated. Okay, they are not nucleate. They do not possess nucleus because their major role is only to carry oxygen and carbon dioxide. So they need place for it, right? So that's the reason it's only completely covered by hemoglobin molecules. And moreover, nucleus is needed when there is cell division and all other various other protein synthesizing activities. But RBCs are destined to only carry oxygen. Hence, they also do not need division. All their division happens in the bone marrow itself. Okay, so hence they individually do not need nucleus. And also to accommodate so many hemoglobin molecules, human RBCs are devoid of nucleus. Okay, so coming back to the topic, yeah, as mentioned, CO2 comes in and oxygen from here, which is bound to hemoglobin molecules, they enter into the tissues. Now in this tissue, glucose will be there. Okay, so this glucose molecule is going to associate with this oxygen. Finally, they are going to undergo cellular respiration and produce products, again release CO2 as a waste product. So this is what is the entire activity going to happen around the clock. Alright, let's go ahead. Yeah, this diagram is very important. I want you to spend few seconds on this in understanding what exactly is the process happening here. Okay, do not ignore this slide, it is very important. Okay, so gas exchange at respiring tissues, gas exchange at the lungs in the alveoli. So we will start from what happens in the CO2, with respect to CO2. I told you that CO2 is produced in the cells. First, it is in dissolved form. It is sent into the blood plasma. So this is the plasma part of the blood. This is the RBC. Okay. So in the plasma, CO2 is present in dissolved form. So this is the first form or one form that it is going to travel till the lungs. Okay, so we'll just rather say oxygen is going to move in a car called as the hemoglobin, which provides place for 4 oxygen molecules. Okay, it's a cab. RBC is a hemoglobin is a cab that is going to carry 4 oxygen molecules, and there are many such in each RBC. But when it comes to CO2 is going to come through road, okay, via road. It is also going to come in the RBC in standing position and also going to come in the RBC in sitting position. Okay, let's see how exactly that is. Just to give you an example. Yeah, now you will see that the blue mark is showing one is dissolved carbon dioxide. Another one is it is inside the RBC, right? In what form is it? CO2 is associated with hemoglobin. It is called as the carboxy hemoglobin or carbamino hemoglobin. There is no space to write here, so I will just tell you it is called as carboxy hemoglobin or carbamino hemoglobin. Okay, next, so this is one form of it where I told you it is going to be attached to the cab. Let us consider hemoglobin to be the cab or the car. Okay, so some carbon dioxide molecules will get a chance to sit in the car while the others, okay, here carbon dioxide will enter the RBC. It will interact with the water present. There is an enzyme called as Carbonic Anhydrase. It is Carbonic anhydrase enzyme, which is going to convert and form what we call as a bicarbonate. Okay, so this bicarbonate is going to keep releasing hydrogen and it's going to be in the ionic form. Okay, so we have this form wherein in bicarbonate form it's going to travel, It is going to travel in carbaminohemoglobin form and in dissolved CO2 form. It's going to move, travel, and finally come to the lungs, to the alveoli. Let's see what happens here. Dissolved CO2, the one which was walking via the road, it will quietly enter into the alveoli. No hazel, it's just going to be in dissolved state. Now, what happens to this, the carbaminohemoglobin? It can't go out along with hemoglobin, right? Because hemoglobin is a metal protein which cannot cross this membrane, right? So what it does, it again reforms. Hemoglobin is going to make its passengers get down. Okay, so the cab is going to remain and only the carbon dioxide molecules will get down and they will move to their destination. Okay, now what happens to the other one? Here, which was in bicarbonate form, that is again going to be acted upon by this enzyme carbonic anhydrase, and they are going to same things, contents that had combined to form bicarbonate, they are going to separate, and the CO2 is going to move to the alveoli. So see, in three forms, in 1, 2, 3 forms, carbon dioxide travels in the associated in the bloodstream. Okay, now here again they are going to take, oxygen is going to take lift and it is directly going to go and sit in the car, that is the hemoglobin, because it does not know any other way. It just cannot move. Let's consider this as some public transport. It cannot go in a public transport, nor can it go via the road. So this is what it does. It combines with oxygen and becomes hemoglobin and becomes oxyhemoglobin, and it's going to travel only that way. You can see some green color structure here which is representing chlorine. Okay, Cl represents chlorine. This is concept called as chloride shift. What it is, we shall study about that in further slides. Alright, yeah. Have a look here. Okay, whatever air is inspired, alveolar air, there is the concept called as partial pressure. Now the term itself says partial pressure. When I say air, as I told you, air is a mixture of gas. Now partial is just a part of it. So partial pressure of oxygen, like only we are going to consider what pressure oxygen is going to kind of put. Okay, so we are not least concerned about the other gases because they make they do not have any significance here. So considering the partial pressure of oxygen, it is represented by this way, small p and the name of the oxygen, the symbol. So the partial pressure of oxygen is 104 mm of Hg. This is the unit that measures the pressure. Okay, and here you can see that the pressure of oxygen is more in the alveoli and pressure of carbon dioxide is less. See, when we say mixture of gases, it also contains CO2, but CO2 will not enter. It will never go from alveoli to the blood vessel. It always has only reverse. Okay, it's only oxygen, and here the oxygen, atmospheric oxygen partial pressure is more compared to CO2 and also compared to the blood vessel here. Okay, so by diffusion, simple diffusion, oxygen is going to move into the blood vessel. Okay, yeah, oxygen is going to travel to the lung, through the heart to the lungs. Okay, and then it's going to come to from lungs to all the parts of the body. Here, coming to the body tissues, what happens here is partial pressure of oxygen is going to be it's reduced, whereas the partial pressure of CO2, partial pressure of oxygen is still more. Alright, and partial pressure of CO2 is 40. Okay, here the exchange is going to take place again, wherein this is in systemic arteries. This is in systemic arteries. Oxygen is going to be taken, again it's going to move from its region of higher concentration to the region of lower concentration. CO2 here is going to move from its region of higher concentration to the region of its lower concentration, and CO2 is going to travel. I told you the way it travels in three forms. Okay, and the same is going to come back to the alveoli and it is going to move into the lungs. Okay. Just give me a second. Alright, let's move to the transport of gases. Let's try to understand what is this concept all about. So we know that the way blood, these two gases travel along, we have already seen that. Another image to give you a better idea. So carbon dioxide is carried in solution and bound to hemoglobin in the blood. I told you in 2 ways, 3 ways it is carried. Okay. Yeah, so have a look at this. Respiring cells, CO2, interstitial fluid and capillary wall enters into the RBC. So when it enters the RBC, hemoglobin is bound with the oxygen. Oxygen releases into the cell. Okay, now this CO2 combines with the hemoglobin. Hemoglobin bound with the carbon dioxide and is carried in the red blood cell. Okay, on the other hand, carbon dioxide is changed into hydrogen carbonate or hydrogen carbonate ions for transport of blood plasma. Okay, this is what happens. It is in the, this part is a RBC blood plasma that it is going to travel in. Okay, next image. Yeah, a respiring cell in carbonic form. How exactly? The other part of it, the third format. Okay, the carbon, first point is carbon dioxide can be dissolved in the blood. Okay, carbon dioxide enters the RBC. Carbon dioxide binds with hemoglobin, forming carbaminohemoglobin. Carbonic acid found in the RBC speeds up the production of hydrogen carbonate ions. I use the term bicarbonate. I'm sorry, it should be hydrogen carbonate. Hydrogen carbonate ions are pumped out of the RBC into the blood. Okay. So chloride shift causes movement of chloride ions into the RBC to balance movement of hydrogen carbonate ions out of the RBCs. So what happens here? This is a very interesting thing that we need to understand. I told you this is an ionic form. Okay. So this HCO3, hydrogen carbonate, has the tendency of moving out of the RBC and entering the plasma. So this will create an imbalance and that will increase the concentration of H plus ions. If H plus ions increase, then the concentration of or pH of the blood cell will increase, because hydrogen ion pH, definition of pH, it refers to the H plus ions. More the H plus ions, more the solution or the content is acidic. Okay, so there is going to be imbalance in the pH and that cannot happen. Okay, because that will alter the physiology or metabolism of various other components. So that cannot happen. In order to balance that, the chloride ions that are in the plasma, they enter inside. So there is a balance brought about here. Now don't think that H and Cl will combine to form HCl, because this process is so fast that HCO goes out, Cl comes in, Cl again goes out, H plus gets in again, Cl goes out. So this process is quite fast. So there is no chance for this. Moreover, that there has to be an enzyme to combine this. Okay, like here there is an enzyme called as Carbonic Anhydrase that will do the work. As such, there is no enzyme that is going to combine H with Cl. So HCl will not be formed. Right, so this was a brief idea about chloride shift. There is another slide that will give you detailed idea about it. Okay, yeah, coming to this another concept called as the oxygen binding affinity. This is structure HB is the short form of hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is made up of, as I told you, heme, this is the globin part, and heme is the metallic component. If this is the structure of hemoglobin, it has got 4 places for attachment of oxygen molecules, and all of this happens gradually. Okay, as and how oxygen enters, they are going to go and find their place. It's like an empty bus sitting, and as and how before it leaves the station till it gets full, the bus doesn't leave. It is somewhat similar to that. Gradually, as and how the oxygen molecules come in association with the hemoglobin, one by one the places start to fill. Okay, you can see here position 1, position 1, 2, position 1, 2, 3, position 1, 2, 3, 4. So this concept is called as oxygen binding affinity. To whom is it going to bind? To the hemoglobin. Okay. Yeah. So we shall see what is going to happen next. Yeah. Oxygen dissociation curves show the affinity of hemoglobin for oxygen. So oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve. It is a sigmoid shaped curve. Sigmoid means this shape. Sorry. This shape. Alright. S shape somewhat. So sigmoid curve of the relationship between HB, hemoglobin saturation. Saturation is nothing but getting filled. Okay. Saturation with oxygen at different partial pressures. Now, high hemoglobin saturation occurs where pH of, that is partial pressure of oxygen is high, that is in the lungs. So you can see that in lungs completely oxygen is easily available, so they are going to quickly go and fill the hemoglobin molecules, and as a result you can see that the plateau part of graph exists in pulmonary capillaries where maximum oxygen saturation occurs. Okay, coming down you can see that one by one, the oxygen you can see the one filled with blue, so it shows saturation. Okay, wherever you can see some gap, it shows that there is less amount of oxygen saturation. Yeah, so here you can see that gradually, starting from low affinity, zero affinity, gradually the oxygen goes on filling, and finally when the blood, pulmonary blood is rich in oxygen, hence the hydrogen, the hemoglobin exhibits high saturation. Okay, so where the partial pressure of oxygen is low, oxygen saturation is also low. As and how the partial pressure of oxygen increases, there is increase in oxygen saturation in the hemoglobin. Just observe what is given along the x-axis and the y-axis. X-axis tells you about the partial pressure. Where is the pressure of oxygen more? In the lungs. Here this is saturation of hemoglobin. Where will the saturation be more? Again in the lungs or pulmonary capillaries. Right? Yeah. So let's go ahead. There is another simpler version of the same content. Okay. Oxygen dissociation curve for adult hemoglobin is sigmoidal due to cooperative binding. Okay, one by one they start binding. There is a low saturation of hemoglobin when oxygen levels are low. That is, hemoglobin releases oxygen in hypoxic tissues. Hypoxic means where oxygen is less. There is high saturation of hemoglobin where oxygen levels are high. That is, hemoglobin binds with oxygen in oxygen rich tissues. Okay, just have a look. As and how the partial pressure. Now the partial pressure of oxygen is more in alveoli, hence it's going to be high in lungs. The partial pressure in the cell which has just completely worn out, has produced more CO2, their oxygen is definitely going to be less. So exercising tissues, just told you, where continuous legs, say legs, or completely tired, where entire oxygen has been used by the cells, it breaks down, gives you energy to run, to do any kind of physical activity or exercise. Finally, as a result, it forms CO2. So from where are you going to get oxygen? From nowhere. Hence the oxygen content in such tissues is low. Gradually when you rest, oxygen goes on filling and it shows the saturation increasing. Finally when it reaches in the lungs, definitely the oxygen capacity is going to be more. Okay, yeah. The fetal hemoglobin is different from adults. What happens here is, in fetal in the sense hemoglobin of a fetus or a baby, fetal hemoglobin has a different structure than the adult hemoglobin. Fetal hemoglobin structure provides it with greater affinity for oxygen at all partial pressures of oxygen. Okay. Therefore, oxygen will be released by the adult hemoglobin in the placenta at all partial pressures. Fetal hemoglobin will have a greater oxygen saturation than the adult hemoglobin at all partial pressures of oxygen. Fetal hemoglobin will not release any oxygen until it has reached the tissues of the fetus. Okay. Yeah, so this point they are saying that whenever blood enters, through placenta, it's going to happen. It's in the fetus, right? Developing fetus. So oxygen from mother is going to be taken, and for a period of 9 months, it is like a new organ in the body of the woman. Okay. So this air is going to be oxygen is going to travel through the placenta and reach each and every cell of the fetus. Okay, there is no reduction in any kind of oxygen molecules. It's going to be taken up by each and every cell evenly. Okay, finally, yeah, it's whatever CO2 is given, that is on the way. Oxygen, when it is reaching the lungs, the point of what I want to tell here is fetal hemoglobin will not release any oxygen until it has reached the tissues of the fetus. Okay, yeah, you can just see this image here. The adult saturation and fetal saturation is just little, it has little different, there is a shift in it. Okay, fetal hemoglobin, another small explanation. The hemoglobin of the fetus has a slightly different molecular composition than the adult hemoglobin. Consequently, it has higher affinity for oxygen. Dissociation curve shifts towards the left. This is important as it means fetal hemoglobin will load oxygen when adult hemoglobin is unloading it. This is an important point. When adult hemoglobin starts to unload or starts to utilize the oxygen, fetal is going to load it. Okay, the ones which comes, like the oxygen given that comes till the placenta, when that oxygen comes in contact with the fetal tissues, okay, that is going to pick up and start to load, but it's not getting used, but it is taking it further. Okay, so following birth, fetal hemoglobin is almost completely replaced by adult hemoglobin. Okay, so fetal hemoglobin production can be pharmacologically induced in adults to treat diseases such as sickle cell anemia. Remember this. Alright. Yeah. Before we continue, we shall just take a break here. Okay, and shall continue with the role of myoglobin in the next session. Thank you.